he is the Senior Director, Strategy, Portfolio, Partnerships, and Digital Division at Commonwealth Secretariat. Mr. Joshua Setipa was the Managing Director for the Technology Bank for Least Developed Countries. With over 2 decades of experience in senior roles, he had portfolios of international trade, economic policy, investment strategy, and economic development at the national, regional, and multilateral levels. Mr. Setipa has a huge experience and knowledge on the issues affecting least developed countries. He has also been working with the World Bank, where he has been leading the strategic engagements with West Africa. He has extensive experience formulating and implementing national and regional development projects in sub-Sahara Africa. For 2 good years, he was the Minister of Trade and Industry for the government of Lesotho. Prior to this, he worked as CEO for the Lesotho National Development Corporation. He was senior advisor to the Director General of World Trade Organization for over 6 years. He holds a master's degree in business administration and international finance from the University of Bradford, UK. He also had a graduate diploma in international relations and trade from the Australian National University and a Bachelor of Arts in public administration and political science from National University of Lesotho. Sir, thank you very much for joining us and taking time out to visit Pakistan also. So we are having the title of this discussion is Navigating the Crossroads, Climate Crisis and Global Trade. So just to break the ice, I would really like to ask that how did you get started with the inception phase of your career?
Well, thank you very much, Wasif. Let me also say how delighted I am to be in Islamabad, but also to be participating in this important event over the next day or two. It's my first visit to Pakistan, so I have a lot to try and about Pakistan in Islamabad. Of course, over the years, I've worked with many Pakistani officials, diplomats, and so forth. But I'm delighted to be here. I started like most bureaucrats. I joined government after school and joined the foreign service in my country and had the opportunity of working on a number of issues at the bilateral level and then, of course, at the multilateral level. Yes.
Right. So for the youngsters and the youth of Pakistan and across the globe, who adore you, really, what is one piece of advice would you like for them to start their career?
I think the most important part of anyone's journey starts at school. So stay at school, find something that you're passionate about, and work on it. I think education is probably the single most important tool that any individual can have, because through education you're able to follow your passion, you're able to fulfill your duty in society and contribute to the development of your country. So I would say education is probably, for me, the most important part of anybody's personal development.
Right. So how is the Commonwealth Secretariat is really engaged with Pakistan?
Well, Pakistan is a very important and very active member of the Commonwealth. As you know, there are 56 countries in the Commonwealth with a total population of 2.5 billion. The biggest Commonwealth member state is India with about 1.2 billion people. And the smallest is Nauru with about 10,000 people. So Pakistan is an active part of that. At the moment, Pakistan is deputy chair of the Board of Governors of the Commonwealth. That's the decision-making body of the Commonwealth. At the moment, also Pakistan is chairing and leading discussions on how best to enhance the operations of the Secretariat to better enhance its ability to deliver to member states. It's a very important discussion because It will also help ensure that the Secretariat is better aligned with member states' aspirations. It is best placed to support countries in addressing a whole range of issues in a very efficient and effective manner. So from that, I would say Pakistan is very critical. It plays a very critical role in our daily work. I am the secretary to the Board of Governors, so I'm the secretary to that board that Pakistan is deputy chair of. I'm also the secretary to the informal working group on administration, which is chaired by Pakistan.
Very right. As you know, that Pakistan is struggling very hard with the economic crisis. What are your suggestions to make it, more sustainable and to empower our economy? What do you think? What's your take on it?
Well, I think almost every country today is facing a whole range of challenges and trying to recover from the COVID pandemic, trying to mitigate the impact of some of these crises that are happening beyond the borders of Pakistan. The war in Ukraine, for example, has a global impact on a whole range of issues for Pakistan, just like any other developing country. Trade flows have been impacted by that war. So Pakistan is not the only one. It's not unique. What I think the difference is, how do countries cope with that? What are countries doing at the domestic level to mitigate that? And one of the areas where there is always possibility and opportunity for governments to help build resilience is continuous policy reform. Continuously reviewing policies to make sure that they are supportive of and drive efforts to enhance whether it's competitiveness from a trade policy perspective, or whether it's building resilience for communities to deal with these disruptions. One of the areas where governments have a whole range of opportunity to do that is in making sure that continuously efforts are made to enhance governance, which is very important, because governance also impacts on perceptions. If you take, for example, investment decisions. Investment decisions are, on average, I would say, about 40 to 50% perceptions, and then the rest is business sense. So if you're perceived to be inefficient, if you're perceived to be not transparent, then investors shy away. So governments have to invest, and the same would go for the government of Pakistan, bringing transparency in how business is conducted. And I think the Pakistani Single Window Authority is a very good initiative in that regard. It has brought about transparency. It has brought about a much more seamless way that business can be able to interact and do business in Pakistan. That's a very good step. There's still a lot of work, and it's not a one-off. It's work that has to continuously be carried out, which is to look at areas where Pakistan as a country has competitive advantage. How does Pakistan integrate itself into the regional markets, for example? How does Pakistan integrate itself into the global supply chains? Where does Pakistan identify market opportunities? Continuously looking for trade to enhance its trade relations by identifying markets, by identifying ways to reduce the cost of doing business in Pakistan. Because if administrative hurdles undermine all the work that is being done to reduce tariffs, then it nullifies all the reform process. So it is important that it's one to understand that it's a continuous business. It's not something that it's not switching off a light that you do it once and then you sit back and relax. You have to continuously do that. Also, Pakistan is neighboring some of the most competitive economies in the world. It's in a very competitive and dynamic part of the world. Southeast Asia, South Asia is a very dynamic region. Now, focusing political energy towards enhancing regional cooperation is very important, because by doing that, before you even look at export markets further afield, it's already a market that is quite lucrative. We've got countries like India, you've got countries like Bhutan, countries like Bangladesh, and so forth, that are quite dynamic economies that are doing very well. And that Pakistan can also, and Pakistan is a leader in this region, and it can play a very strategic role and align its political energy in that direction.
Very right. These are very, I mean, very considerable suggestions for the Pakistan's government. And I truly believe that Pakistan is not one of those countries who are being very hard hit by the COVID. I just want to, I mean, make it a little more easy for the public and those who are not having a background of trade and economy. What is a United Nations technology bank? Because you were wearing a hat of, the UN's technology bank. So what is it, and how is it engaged with the South Asian countries and Pakistan also?
Well, I don't speak for the Technology Bank anymore, but I was asked in 2018 by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres, to go and set up the bank, to establish the bank, and he appointed me as the first managing director of the bank, headquartered in Istanbul. The bank was created out of a realization that the rest of the world is moving at lightning speed from a technology point of view, but there is a set of countries that are lagging behind, and the gap between them and the rest of the world is widening. So unless there is a deliberate effort to provide support to these countries to catch up, to leapfrog, they will be left behind forever. Today, we're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. These countries are still struggling with the first or second industrial revolution issues. So the bank was created to provide support in that regard. It is particularly focused on providing support to the least developed countries, of which, of course, Pakistan is not a member of. Pakistan is a developing country. It's not a least developed country, so it does not benefit from the work or the support of the Technology Bank. But Pakistan is a strategic partner for the bank, in the sense that Pakistan, from a science, technology, and innovation perspective, has a lot to offer based on its experiences to least developed countries. If you look at in South Asia today, you have Nepal, which is a least developed country. You've got Bangladesh, which is a least developed country. You've got Bhutan, which is a least developed country. And just from that angle, Pakistan has a lot to offer in terms of helping them build capacity around research, for example. If you look at the global output of research today, less than 1% of it comes from the least developed countries. If you look at the national expenditure on research from these countries, it's minuscule, which means that there isn't enough resources that are going into research. There isn't enough capacity that has been built to enhance the national research capacity. So Pakistan has that opportunity to help build that capacity in these countries. Secondly, from a technology transfer perspective, Pakistan has a lot of experience, in our view, that it can share with these countries. You know, today countries are faced with a very difficult challenge as to which technologies to adopt, because it's no longer an intellectual property issue that technologies are of reach. The challenge is, how do you identify the technology that you need? How do you then adapt it to your realities and then scale it up? That's what we believe. From that angle, Pakistan also has a very important role to play as a strategic partner in supporting these countries. From an innovation perspective, of course, how do countries create ecosystems that facilitate and encourage and enhance the innovation capacity that we know exists? We know countries, the only difference between a child growing up in Zambia and a child growing up in Tokyo is that a child growing up in Tokyo, by the time he's 5 or 6 or 7, he's already familiar with some of the basic elements around computer science. He can already code, he can already play around with robotic kids and be able to do that. But a child growing up in Zambia opens up or switches on a laptop the day he gets to high school, when he's already in his teens. So if we can build and level the playing field by making it accessible, then we can unleash that innovation potential that we know exists in these countries. And I think for countries in least developed countries, it's easier to relate to the experiences of countries like Pakistan because of similar challenges than to relate to experiences of a developed country like Japan. So countries like Pakistan, countries like Turkey, are very important to that in that regard. In fact, one of the partnerships that I entered into or facilitated when I was at the Technology Bank was through the Organization of Islamic Countries, where Pakistan of course, is a big, an important partner of that, but also from the economic part of that agenda, we're able to establish a relationship that would allow us to exchange these experiences with this country. So, in as far as the Technology Bank is concerned, we see Pakistan more as a strategic partner, not a beneficiary.
So, as a student, I just want to ask that how is UN's Technology Bank different from World Bank and Asian Development Bank and all that? Because all of them are supporting the countries. And just to dovetail one more question, that in OIC, which countries are included in the UN's Technology Bank?
The Technology Bank is not a bank in the sense that you don't get a check like you'd get from the World Bank. What it is, it's a repository of technology. So countries and private sector entities make available technologies that are then made available to least developed countries. So a country is looking for technology to address, for example, access to clean water for villages. Rather than go and search the world to look at applications that can work, it comes to the Technology Bank. The Technology Bank is then able to facilitate access to that technology, facilitate strategic relationships that can then address that question. I give you an example. When COVID broke, countries were scrambling around to find ventilators. If you remember the first part of COVID, countries, there was a global shortage of ventilators. We were able to approach NASA, the Jet Propulsion Lab at NASA, and Medtronics to give us access to the technologies for ventilators, and we're able to help countries design and build their own ventilators. The first ventilator, national ventilator in Uganda, was developed using technologies that we were able to give to them from NASA. So that's just an example of how we're able to help countries. We're able to help countries also acquire technologies to manufacture equipment, including N19 masks, so they were called N90s, N95. Yeah, you're right. We were able to get that technology from a Turkish company, and through that, and for this one, we're actually not only supporting countries that were LDCs. The first country that we provided the technology to was Costa Rica. And through that, Costa Rica was able to produce N90 masks that it was able to sell, to provide for its citizens, but also to sell in the Central American market and also in the US market. And this was technology that they were acquired through the Technology Bank. Yes.
So just taking the benefit of your experience as a senior, position holder with WTO, the World Trade Organization, what are your suggestions to, improve the international trade in case of Pakistan, of course?
Well, like I said, I think the most important thing is there are two sides, of course. First is how do you, well, let me start by saying that it's important that policymakers, particularly politicians, understand that countries don't trade. It's private sector that trades. So if, as a politician or as a policymaker, you can understand that your job as a policymaker is to level the playing field, is to remove obstacles, is to improve transparency, is to reduce the cost of trade, the cost of doing trade, then let the private sector do its part. So that's number one. You cannot talk about trade competitiveness if you have not focused your effort in making it easy for the private sector to be able to do its part. Yes, governments and politicians negotiate trade agreements, but those trade agreements have to be based on a very clear understanding of what are the competitive sectors for that economy? What are the priority? What are the strategic interests? There is no point in negotiating market access in fighter jets if you're not exporting fighter jets. So you have to understand what your competitiveness is. So that's the first one. Secondly, as I said, understanding and positioning Pakistan within a regional context is a first, being able to identify where the niche market is for Pakistani exports and being able to then create market opportunities for that. Secondly, ensuring that Pakistan is embedded and is part of the global supply chains, which allow it to be able to compete and provide inputs to end products that are maybe developed and exported from China. That's very important. And understanding how the global the multilateral trading system and the instruments it has provides that ability. The other advantage, of course, is that when countries negotiate bilateral trade agreements, there's also power dynamics. Pakistan is a big country. So if it has to sit across the table, of course, with a country as big as China, it becomes also tricky because there are also a whole range of considerations that are at play that may tilt the negotiations in the favor of the stronger of the two, in this case being China. But the WTO provides a level playing field where a country as small as Nauru can sit across the table and negotiate with a big country like the US. And the system guarantees that the negotiations will take into account and reflect the strategic interests of Nauru also, in as much as it reflects the strategic interests of the bigger partner being the US in this case. So building capacity to negotiate is very important for Pakistan, like for other countries, with a very clear sense of what are the strategic interests of Pakistan, which are the sectors that drive Pakistan's competitiveness, and what are the policies that you need to put in place to support that competitiveness. If your tariff policy is out of step with your trade policy, then it means your tariff policy will make the cost of producing certain products very expensive because you've put up tariffs on inputs that you need to be able to produce the products that you need to be able to be competitive. So there's a whole range of policy instruments that have to be aligned. Governments, of course, are always looking to generate revenue. So the finance minister will tell you that we cannot reduce tariffs because it has an impact on our revenue. But the trade minister then has to counter that by saying, if you keep tariffs high on certain inputs that we need for competitiveness, it's going to undermine our ability to trade. So there has to be a very clear understanding of what the national strategic interest is from a trade perspective, and then what the role of all the other players are. The customs, how do you streamline customs procedures? How do you make it less costly for business to import and export? How do you make it easy to access finance? If there's no liquidity in the market, trade finance becomes costly, becomes difficult, and without trade finance, there's no trade. How do you provide access to finance for small, medium enterprises? How do you make sure that banks provide access to finance for them? Because, banks are very risk averse. So if you come as a small businessman and you're not able to provide a balance sheet over the last 5 years, they don't give you money. So government has to step in, provide ways to mitigate that risk for banks so they can lend. So there's a whole range of instruments that have to be done within the country before we can even talk about the global trading scenario. Pakistan, for example, is very competitive in the textile sector. The textile sector relies, one of the main inputs is cotton. Now, if countries continue to maintain high levels of domestic subsidies in the cotton sector, the US, for example, those subsidies are trade distorting, and they impact on the ability of Pakistan cotton growers to be competitive and provide, to be able to sell their cotton. So it's in Pakistan's interest to go negotiate at the WTO for a reduction of domestic subsidies, trade distorting domestic subsidies. I give you an example. When I was trade minister, one of the things that my country does is also textiles, clothing, but we don't grow cotton. So we import cotton from Pakistan, we import yarn from Pakistan, and we're far away from Pakistan. If the cost of importing from Pakistan becomes excessive, it means we have to look at other markets where we can be able to source cotton and other inputs. So there is a whole chain that impacts performance from a trade perspective.
So this cotton sector and the textile sector reminded me of a question that Pakistan is a climate hit country, and there are a number of episodes in the past you might have witnessed. How in this scenario can Pakistan cope up with the climate issue, and how we can improve our exports, and what is your one suggestion for reducing imports and expansion of exports? Because you have already talked a lot of things on trade, but still what is your one key message for improving our exports and reducing imports?
I don't think there's a one answer to that. I don't think there's one answer to that, because at the end of the day, imports are also good, because you're importing inputs that you need to enhance your ability to export. No country, no economy is an island. Economies are interconnected. So I think the most important, from where I stand, the most important issue is, how do you keep exports high, and how do you reduce imports without restricting trade? Because the last thing you want is to be a protectionist economy where you shut out the rest of the world. You don't buy anything from the rest of the world, but you want to sell. It never works that way. And it's also, from a welfare perspective, it's also very destructive, because it means that your consumers and your economy is missing out on inputs that could actually reduce cost of, not just cost of doing business, but just overall cost of everything, from cars to everyday things that we buy. So continuing to find those, and it doesn't have to be 20 sectors. Of course, the more diversified an economy, the better. But identifying that basket of products and sectors where you say, this is where our niche market is, this is what we're competitive. For example, pharmaceuticals for Pakistan. That's an area where I believe Pakistan also has a potential to be quite competitive, particularly in this region. There's also, I think, on agriculture, I think there's also potential there. But of course, agriculture is also very sensitive and highly affected by climate change. So that there are also issues there that we need to work on to build resilience. Now, if you allow me, you mentioned some of the climate change related challenges that Pakistan has experienced recently. I think from a trade perspective, climate change brings opportunities. It also brings risks. The risks, of course, are the impact of climate change related disasters like floods, like storms which disrupt transport networks, for example. The change in sea patterns, which then also impact on the shipping lanes. The impact of climate change on farming, the disruption to small farmers, and ability to produce, the impact on supply networks, even within the country, being able to move harvest from one part of the country to one part of the country. So that is a negative part, and that has a big impact on a country's ability to export, because if you're not producing because of disruptions to floods and storms and all that, then you're not able to remain competitive. But we've also seen an emergence of opportunities, particularly in the energy transition sector, where countries identifying opportunities to be able to produce technologies that help countries move to much cleaner energy production sources, lithium, battery storages, solar panels, and all that. that's an opportunity where countries are already doing it, where new industries are emerging, where countries are just focusing on how do we play a part in this sector. Countries are producing batteries for electric cars. Is that an opportunity for Pakistan to exploit? We have abundance of wind, you have abundance of sun. Can we look at how we can position Pakistan to be an energy secure country? You have electricity challenges, supply challenges today. Can we look at how we can turn that into an opportunity and produce energy in a much more sustainable way? That means that the disruptions that industry face today because of power shortages and load shedding will be a thing of yesterday, because you cannot drive an industry or drive an economy if you are energy deficient. If a business spends about 60% of their operating cost on energy cost, it's not competitive. You're not going to be able to reach that level of export competitiveness that we're looking for. So how do we address that? How do we first make Pakistan energy secure in a sustainable way? And then look at how we can also then be a major player in providing some of those technologies that are very important for energy transition purposes.
So by the virtue of your presence, as you know that the COP on climate is around the corner, what are your suggestions for the Pakistan government for, I mean, what are the key takeaways which they can, given that?
Well, I think Pakistan, like most developing countries, the number one priority should be to get countries, the big economies, to play their part in not just undertaking commitments, but actually implementing those commitments to implement measures that reduce the impact that they're having on the global stage. Now, I think it is also important for Pakistan, like most developing countries, to be able to access climate finance, to be able to finance all manners of challenges that they face, adaptation, making sure that they build resilience in the economies, putting in place social safety nets that help particularly the most vulnerable parts of the economy to be able to continue to thrive. Now, those commitments have been made in the past, but very few countries have seen even a single dollar. So how can we operationalize those commitments? One of the things that the Commonwealth Secretariat is going to do with Pakistan, we recently received a request from Pakistan for the Commonwealth to provide support on climate finance access. What we do as a Commonwealth is we place in each country climate finance access advisors. Their single job is to work with governments to put together programs that help them access this climate finance. I was recently in Fiji, where through that support, we've helped Fiji raise over $100 million worth of finance within a very short period of time. We will be providing that support to Pakistan soon, and that capacity hopefully will see an increase in terms of accessing climate finance for Pakistan to be able to finance all these adjustments that have to be financed, to provide support to government to be able to implement ways to build resilience into the economy.
That sounds a good news for Pakistan. How is your organization, how is Commonwealth Secretariat is engaged with think tanks all across the world?
Well, think tanks, in our view, are a very important part of the policy-making process. Governments, politicians implement, they craft, they introduce, and they campaign based on policies. Now, those policies Their sustainability is based on how much are they based on empirical research? How are they based on the realities in the economy and in the country? Now, think tanks come into play. Think tanks have a very important role in providing input to policymaking. Policymaking that is not just based on political aspirations, but input that is based on realities that are driven by research. And that is, I think, the fundamental role that think tanks play in any community, in any society, in any economy. Now, from a Commonwealth perspective, our interest is in strengthening networks of think tanks across the Commonwealth, so that we can be able to exchange experiences, we can be able to network, we can be able to pool resources, and particularly South, particularly between developing countries in the Commonwealth. It's much easier for researcher in Pakistan to go and provide support towards policy making in Nepal or in Lesotho than to go and provide support towards policy making in Canada. So we are very much interested in strengthening these networks of think tanks and making sure that governments see them as strategic partners in their policy making, policy implementation role, rather than just as a partner that is sitting out there that has nothing to do with the work of governments. They're an integral part of the process.
And last but not the least, if I become more particular and more specific, how do you foresee that Commonwealth Secretariat can engage with Pakistani think tanks, and I mean more with STPI also?
Yeah. I will give you an example of what we've been doing with Pakistan over the last 5 years. We've provided, and we continue to provide, support to Pakistan across a range of areas. For example, we've provided support to Pakistan in strengthening the management of elections, in bringing in best practice in election management, in bringing in technology in areas around election cyber security issues, in continuously building capacity for the election management body to be able to conduct elections in a manner that is equitable, that is transparent, and that is credible. And we'll continue to do that. The next elections in Pakistan, when they're announced, I'm sure the Commonwealth will also be there to provide support in that regard. We've also provided support from a trade competitiveness angle, where we've trained Pakistani trade negotiators to build capacity to be more effective, of course, as trade negotiators. We've also provided support to build capacity for women businesses, women-led businesses, under a program called She Trades, which targets specifically designed to target small and medium-sized enterprises that are women-led. We also provide, of course, support to Pakistan from a climate change angle, where we are providing. So Pakistan is part of a group of countries that are focused on addressing mangrove-related issues, on how to ensure that we protect livelihoods of coastal communities and all that. We also have received an expression of interest for Pakistan to receive support in managing its sovereign debt. We have a very successful debt management system that over 17 countries today operate, not just Commonwealth countries, but even countries that are outside the Commonwealth. And Pakistan has expressed an interest in benefiting from that, being able to use that platform to better manage its sovereign debt. So we've also provided support, of course, in the development of a national youth strategy for Pakistan, in developing indices that are able to measure youth development in Pakistan. In fact, recently, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan chaired a meeting of youth ministers of the Commonwealth in London, because this is the year of the youth in the Commonwealth. So there's a whole range of areas where we are cooperating with Pakistan, and will continue to provide that support going forward.
Thank you very much for sharing so many of good news for Pakistan. And I am afraid that we would not be able to take the questions from the audience online or in person. But still, I am really thankful to you for joining us today. And we look forward to, seeing you in the next couple of days where you are around. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
No, 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 no.